Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our listeners across the globe. Welcome to In12D. We're in season 3, episode 27, Full Circle with Joel Richards, part 2. In the studio with me is Joel and, of course, my co-host, Susie Vaughn in Ireland. Susie.
Hi, Ramsey. Good to see you. And hi, Joel. Really glad to have you back on the show. Yes, we had a great show back in season 2. I think it's episode 19. I need to double check that when Joel was with us. And Joel has a lot to share in terms of his story and his experiences. So we decided back then that in order to do it right, we were going to split it into 2 parts. So this is part 2. So thank you so much for coming back to share the next part of the story. So if you're listening to this live or you're listening to the recording, do catch the previous episode to get the backstory on Joel, because we're going to jump straight in today, picking him up in around 1995, I think we decided. So we're going to do about 20 years of his last 20 years, let's say. So thank you, Joel, for coming back.
Sure, happy to be here. So where shall we go? You want me to just pick up where we left off?
I think so. I think that would be a good way. Maybe for the new listeners, if this is the first time you're listening to Joel, he's, how would you say, we're going to talk about enlightenment, going beyond consciousness, explorations, attunements, things like that. So that's where the conversation is going to go. And if you want to find out more about Joel, you can see that his website is fulldawncircle.org, and it's on the ticker tape, but it's also going to be on the bio below this.
Okay. So we left off with the initial realization, but what traditionally is referred to as self-realization. And it came as a complete surprise. I was meditating with a group of people, and wham, there it was. Completely unexpected and not at all like I expected it to be. It is talked about a lot in some ancient traditions, and many of your viewers probably have some familiarity with those traditions. So self-realization is when the shift of identity occurs, where we realize who we really are. And there can be many shifts of identity through our lives prior to self-realization, where the sense of who we are becomes less and less limited. So for some people, they're very limited in the sense of their body-mind, or they feel they're only their body, or they feel they're only their mind, where they find some ground in between the body, mind, ego, and what is realized in self-realization. So that self-realization is an infinite, spacious reality. It's a sense of being that infinite, spacious reality and not being limited or constricted in any way. Pardon me. So that was what happened in 1995. I'd been meditating for 20-something years, doing Transcendental Meditation, which I believe prepared me for that shift to self-realization. But I don't believe that I could trace a causal effect other than just an act of grace. It was just an act of grace in that moment. And my whole sense of identity changed. What I noticed is that nothing else really changed, which was not how I expected it to be. The ego was still doing whatever it does, and the body and the mind were still doing whatever they do. But I came to understand that, that relationship was never really intended to disappear. Without it, we wouldn't have a life. We wouldn't be living in this world. We wouldn't be talking to one another today. So all of that needed to remain intact, even though people go through different types of experiences as that transition occurs. So one thing we were talking about just before getting on, Ramsey brought up how different people have different experiences of these things. And that's true. But there are some fundamentals about it. And the fundamental is it has to do with the shift of identity or being. That's the kind of quintessential element of it. So that's what happened in 1995. And from there, things just began to progress. Now, I came from a background, Transcendental Meditation. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded that, had a map of awakening, and there were different stages. In his model, self-realization was the first stage of awakening. He didn't discuss some of the other possibilities prior to that. And then he moved on from there to what he called God consciousness, unity consciousness, and Brahman consciousness. Now, I found in my experience, things didn't unfold exactly the way his map laid them out. But that was the guiding light of my process. So I was always comparing my experiences to that map.
Can I just ask you just one or two things just to probe in there around 95 when you were in that, I suppose, coming through in that experience, and as you said, when you got up the next morning, like all the other parts of your life were still there, they hadn't changed.
Right.
But could you maybe just give us an idea of what that was like to experience? Like, did the world seem a little bit brighter? Did you feel like more connected or disconnected? Like, what were the kind of qualities in your kind of experience of that?
Well, I would say I felt very distant. If you've ever looked through a pair of binoculars from the wrong direction, it makes everything look far away. Everything was really far away. I was this vast, well, this was a stabilized shift. It wasn't just a glimpse. So I became this vast awareness that was observing what was happening in the body mind, the reactivity of the ego, all of that functioning. But prior to this shift, I felt like my sense of self, my sense of being, was located in my head. I mean, there was a very distinct sense of being in that space. Now I was not in any space. I was in a vast, infinite spaciousness. And so everything that was previously felt to be myself was now pushed out into the distance in front of me, so to speak. And I was observing it. So I was resting in this silent, beautiful, peaceful state while all this activity was happening. And so was the activity of, other people and other things in the environment. All that was still happening just as it had been before. But I wasn't shackled inside of it. I wasn't trapped inside of it. I was free of it. So that was the principal experience.
Okay, like a sense of witnessing what was going on. Like was there a sense of separation of your, how do I word this? A separation from being caught entangled in the world, and so now you're separated out and you're sort of witnessing it from a distant or from an alternative perspective. Within your mind, was there still like the ego voice, the judger, the yum, the yuck, that or had that gone quiet completely? Like, within your mind, was there a quiet kind of observer, or was it
right? So the observer's quiet. It's quiet. The mind is still having thoughts, but the mind is in front of me somewhere. It's not, I'm not in the mind. I'm just observing the mind. I'm observing the body. I'm observing the functioning of the ego. So it's kind of like the ultimate separation, the ultimate duality. These days, a lot of people are thinking in terms of oneness as the first stage of awakening. But this is not like that. This is a very clear distinction that's made between what is the true self and what is everything else.
Okay.
Self, non-self. And I believe that it is an essential realization prior to a true oneness ever coming into some full establishment. Glimpses, yes, but really defining oneness as the integration of self and non-self, where there's a complete unity of both. I think because that's experienced in the context of what the self is, then one has to first know what the self is. It has to be established first. Not everyone agrees with me, and people's experiences differ, but this is the way it unfolded for me. Very, very clear sense of separation. And then the process thereafter was the coming together of the self and the non-self.
Okay.
My experience kind of was a bit different. I just want to see how we can integrate both, or they're just separate based on different people's experiences. Mine was, the first stage was a complete sharing of the old self and total disassociation from life itself and looking at it from a different lens or perspective. Then it took me a while before I rebuilt myself. The new me took a longer time to rebuild than the minute everything shattered. Because for me, I don't know what it was. It was a word, it was a book, whatever it is. I read a book, but something in that book triggered something within for this, what do you call it, facade that I had around to just fall, all of it. And that's, when I say a facade, it's all conditioning and seeing the world in a certain perspective. And after that, everything kind of changed.
Yeah. And I think that process happens, but it doesn't necessarily happen in the same order for people. Because one of the things I recognized, though not in quite the, I don't use this in the wrong sense of the word, but kind of the destructive, breaking apart, having to rebuild way, was that I had certain beliefs which were well established in my belief system, which I realized within moments after awakening that they weren't true. And so, but we're different. So in my case, it was like, oh, okay, that's not true. So, okay, well, what is true? And so, so that set me in part on a path of investigation and exploration to come to terms with what is true rather than, just trying to continue to hold on to some belief that was not. And I think this is part of the process. And I think part of what is a little confusing when we look at different people's experiences is that for some people, like in my case, the shift was really, it was like a complete severing, not a destructive process, but a complete severing. And for other people, there's more of the, what they call the dark night of the soul or the destruction of the ego process that happens. My point, though, is that, and I think it's true of everybody, at some point, we have to come to some way of reconciling our awakening with the fact that we're still, there's a body and mind still here, still functioning, still interacting with Susie and Ramsey and everybody else. Has a job maybe, cooks and cleans, goes to school, does whatever. We have to reconcile that. So one of my beliefs, for example, was, well, I thought I would be completely divorced from the world, and there'd be no connection anymore. Well, I mean, in a sense, I was completely disconnected from the world because my sense of self didn't reside in the world anymore. But I was faced with, oh, there's a body-mind here. Well, what do we do with that? How does that get reintegrated? So for me, there was a reintegration process too, but it was more about trying to understand how my belief about how awakening was supposed to unfold, what was the real truth of how it unfolds for me. Does that sort of address your issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. No two people are having the same experience, and it's just so, like you said, it's almost by the grace of the divinity, or a blessing, or it's just at the spontaneous right moment the shift can happen. It can really just, it's not necessarily in a practice or during, often anyway, it's not during a practice. It can be outside of it, or
That's right.
for sure. So I'm curious about when you're describing it there to me, and trying to come to terms with it, and as a result of it, going on this kind of quest to figure it out, and to try to grasp it in some way. Because like you said, it's not always what you expected it to be. You might have read about another person's experience, so that sets up a certain expectation. And then you're like, well, it's not that, but what is it? But for me personally, it really connected with the heart as well. Like, it wasn't just in the mind that I would have had this kind of massive shift in, how I felt within myself in relation to the world, in relationship to other people, and what was going on within me. Like this kind of, I would just call it like a very expanded state of awareness. Like, it's like my perspective really shifted, but my heart did too. I have to say, like, I felt this massive kind of like there was an overwhelming kind of surge of emotions, and just like this feeling of kind of bliss and aliveness that came to me. Now, did that accompany what was happening? Maybe for this could go to both of you actually, like when you were having what you were describing. Was there a heart-centered aspect?
Who wants to go first?
You
Joel,
go, Joel.
you're the guest.
You're the
Okay.
guest.
For me, there was bliss, there was light, there was peace and serenity. The heart connection, for me, had it occurred, it would have had to have been in the body sense, or in more of a material layer, dimensional layer of the whole completeness of who I am or who anybody is. So that was not part of my initial experience. That came about later, more as a function of the development of unity consciousness rather than in self-realization. So for me, because when I say the body, mind, and ego were just the same as before, they really were just the same as before. There wasn't anything that I was aware of that was happening in the body mind that indicated any kind of shift or change. The change was the shift of identity completely separating out from the body, mind, and ego. And over time, there were layers of integration. I guess you could say a reintegration, kind of similar to maybe Ramsey's experience. But that was part of the next stage for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a similar experience too in terms of reintegration, but at that single point in time, I remember, oh my God, everybody's lying to me. And it's this kind of disconnect from everything. And like you mentioned, before awakening or enlightenment, you do your job, dishes, and you do the laundry. And after the enlightenment, you still have to do everything else. So that didn't change, although I tried to resist it. But it was there, I had to accept it. And then rebuilding started. So it's, I would say, a smaller variation from each other, but the core is, I think, it's almost the same, and depends, I think, on a person's journey throughout life, because in my case, for example, I went through trauma of war, whereby I realized years after my awakening that I'm disconnected from my body. So I had two entities working. They're not two separate. I'm not Cisco. Was it cycles? I can't find the word, but I was kind of separated from my body, and I won't feel pain if you want to. Until I reintegrated myself into one, and then a different journey started from that point.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the interview, so we started in 1995, and I know that when we were talking before going live, that in around 2013, you had an experience of what you would describe as oneness, or like the state of unity consciousness. So was that due to a particular practice or an event or a retreat or something that you were, seeking or trying, an experience that you were trying to have? Or I don't know how to put this. Like, how did that, was it spontaneous? How did that come about?
Well, it was a process. So
Yeah.
I continued meditating over the years. I occasionally went to retreats, but it wasn't the same kind of a process. It wasn't so much a shift of identity as it was a change in perception. So I just noticed over time that things in my environment, for example, became more and more transparent. Not that I could see through them and they weren't there, but that there was something about the substratum of them that was coming through, that was bleeding through, that I could see or feel. And so that was the beginning. And then progressively, the scope in which that occurred expanded. So it might have started with initially just observing a bush or a tree and seeing that there was something behind it that was present, moving forward toward me. Not literally moving forward toward me, but kind of experientially, that would be the direction I would describe it as. And then that established, and then the group of trees, and then the whole park, and then the city, and then the planet, and then the universe, and then beyond anything that I could actually logically perceive with any of the five senses. And all of that came together. And then when that fully came together, which was in 2013, that was when I would have qualified my experience and say, oh, this is what Maharishi talked about as unity consciousness, which people are now referring to as oneness. And it was that was the complete experience of no separation. There was nothing that separated anything, but there was still the perception of the distinction between things. I didn't lose the ability to know that it was a tree. I didn't lose the ability to know not to run out in traffic. There were still distinctions and understanding about what things are, but the deeper reality of what they are had come into focus. And that deeper reality of what they are is no different than the deepest reality of who I am. And so all of that got wrapped up into one singularity, one wholeness. And so it's experientially was like, the only metaphor I've come up with so far is being the salt in the ocean, completely penetrated through everything, with no separation. I feel like that's just being redundant, but that's the way that I would characterize that. I was present in everything. Everything was present in me. And that was just the ongoing reality at that point.
Okay. And do you do sort of, were you still under the sort of guidance of a teacher.
Oh no.
I think Mary, she was probably past at that stage, but like, were you following any particular practice or teaching, or were you studying? Were you reading a lot?
I was
You know,
still doing TM.
yeah,
Fundamentally, I did explore other options, but I didn't find anything else that struck me as something I would want to do on a regular basis.
yeah,
And I was just going about my business. I just, again, while that process unfolded, I was aware of it, but I didn't know what the end point was really going to be like.
okay.
And so I continued my spiritual practice. I meditated with a group of people, continued to do that because I enjoyed group meditation. And I did read different things, mostly trying to understand some of the ways in which my experience seemed to diverge from some of the traditional teachings.
Mhm.
And so that's a whole other dimension of my process of determining that the only way I could really understand what was happening was to just pay attention to what was happening and learn from the experience itself rather than trying to find my experience being described in other people's teachings. And so in that way, even though I liked the sense of community, I had to go it alone, so to speak. So during that whole phase, and ever since actually, that was leading up to unity, I was pretty much on my own.
Okay.
And how did you come up with your program? Is it from that point onward, or you were inspired by something, or what
But,
drove you to get into this line of work at the end?
well, that brings us to, well, first of all, I had no aspirations to be a teacher or a mentor or do anything like this. But in 2015, I was meditating and I was visited by a benevolent being. And I just want to say, I'm not one of those crazy people who says, oh, I'm always talking to these, all the various entities of, celestial beings and all that. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I'm saying that with one other exception, prior to 2015, I had never had any direct contact with any being of that nature. But on this occasion, I was meditating, and this being showed up and instructed me in what I refer to as attunement. And initially, the instruction was in attunement to do it as a one-on-one process with people. So after the instruction, the being said, okay, now go out in the world and do that. At that point, a tremendous amount of resistance arose, or an amplification of the resistance I already felt. And I basically said, are you crazy? I'm not going to go out and do this. But I figured that since I was visited and provided with this, I should at least explore it. So what I determined to do was to explore it with people who are willing to be experimented with, so I could see what the process does. And the results were good. But it took me a few years before I decided to hang up a shingle and say, hey, I'm doing this process called attunement, right? Because generally I actually am kind of shy, and public visibility is a little awkward for me. So I had to overcome a lot of resistance, but I'm glad that I did, because I've been able to help people with it. And then there were other things that evolved after that, but fundamentally the attunement process is, at least in the initial form it was given to me, is a process where I sit with somebody on video, Zoom or something, of course, these days, and I look into them. That's the best way I can say that. And I'm drawn to different areas in the body or in the subtle body. And all I do is observe them. What happens when I do that is that native or divine intelligence is alerted. There's something here that needs attention. And it's what I would just generally call a contraction. But a contraction could be a belief, a past experience that's unresolved, an attitude, a kind of reactivity. There's many things that fall into that category. But fundamentally, they are contractions that inhibit or reduce the ability to really recognize who we are, to really see beyond the limitations that we currently have. So that's what it does. So native or divine intelligence comes in, does its thing, and that contraction begins to release. Sometimes it just starts, sometimes it releases in whole, and people can usually feel that. Sometimes they don't initially, but they contact me a week or so later and say, hey, something really happened, and this is how I'm noticing it. So that was the initial attunement practice.
Before we go deeper in the attunement, I have a couple of questions about the visitations. So you're sitting there in complete silence, and then what? Somebody appeared, a vision, or was it a sound, or was it in your mind? How did that evolve? Because people are interested in that. And I think there's a bit of misconception of how to identify what is real in terms of a visitation. We'll keep it at that. And when the ego is playing a trick on you, because sometimes we fall with our egoic self. So I talk to X, Y, and Z, and so on, and I'm so proud of myself with it. But the reality is, it wasn't a true thing, but rather an egoistic creation that was created for me within me, and that's where I see it. I'm not talking about myself, but I'm kind of generalizing there. So how did this whole thing evolve, and what did you actually see, and how did you know that it is a true being visiting you?
Okay. Well, I did have a visitation once before. I can't remember the year. Well, it would have been before 1995. I think. Yeah, it would have been before 1995. And while I couldn't say, although so both of them appeared to me in the same way. At least I can say that was a common feature. The purpose of their visit was different, but they both appeared as a presence. I felt them as if they were in the room. I didn't open my eyes, but had I done so, I doubt I would have seen anything, but I could feel the presence. There was nothing going on ahead of time, like, hey, wouldn't it be great if I could see some sort of divine being right now? Oh, wait, I think I'm feeling one. It wasn't like that. It's just, again, came out of nowhere. And so there was the presence. The presence spoke to me. I didn't hear it with my ears, but I heard it internally. And I could not only feel the presence, but I could see the light that was there, that was emitted by this being, even though my eyes were closed. So I could see that internally. And, I'm a very practical and sort of methodical person. So I'm not going to generally take something as being an authentic being talking to me without some opportunity to test that out. to verify. So that was why when the attunement instruction was given to me, there's just no way I was going to not try to verify that before I hung out a shingle and said, hey, look what I'm doing. But I understand the concern about fantasy versus reality in terms of these beings. And, I have more conversations with beings now than before. I mean, those were out of the blue instances, but over time, the ability to converse has grown. And I had to build trust in that. I mean, it's not that I entered it with the presumption that it was fantasy. I entered it with the presumption that, okay, well, this has to be proven that this is some form of authentic communication, or, I can't rely on it. I can't make use of it. And so over time, again, similar methodology, testing. Okay, all right. So I just got this information. All right, let's see. Let's test that. Oh, that seems to hold up. That seems to hold up. That seems to hold up. So that's the way I satisfied myself that I wasn't dealing with fantasy. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. Because, when you're in a community of, when you join a community of enlightened people, let's call them that, sometimes you see, or from my perspective, I see certain people who believe that they see or they hear. But then I see that is an ego-derived sense of fulfillment of some kind. They are not that they're trying to cheat themselves or others, but they truly believe it because the ego wants to be seen and be present. So it creates the scenario for it, and that's why I want to make sure. How did you distinguish between what is true communication from wherever it is coming from? I will call it the other side. It could be just right over here, and ego discussing with you. So I like the way you actually analyzed it, because I like everything scientific. I like to see everything and touch it. I the first time we started doing mediumship, I couldn't believe what I'm hearing or seeing, and I thought it was hocus pocus even to me. And it took me a while to accept that, yes, this is it.
Yeah, it's good to test these things for sure. Because for me anyway, it's usually when I'm sitting there unexpected and I hear myself say, you couldn't make this up. Like if you were trying to make it up, you wouldn't make it up. You know what I mean? It's so outside of you. It's so beyond, like you said, where you were coming from, or what you were pursuing at the time. And but it gets your attention enough that you're like, okay, this is a new experience now, and it's got my full attention. um and I think, like we introduced this part of the subject matter by saying, I'm not one of those crazy people. I think I think we've all said that, and I know a lot of people who have said to me, I can tell you this because I know you won't think I'm crazy, but, and then like a friend of mine recently, we were chatting, and I said to her, you know what? Do you notice we don't say that anymore? Because we've met so many people in so many different, as we go through the different stages of our own development and life. It's kind of overwhelming now. The evidence is overwhelming. It's not just me. It's not just Ramsey. It's not just Joel, and the multiples of other people that I know and I've come across where they're having kind of experiences with benevolent beings, or with, channeling information, or going into trance, or, various things. So yeah, of course, there's going to be a couple of dodgy ones out there. You know what I mean? We're just all humans at the end of the day, having a human experience. But I think they're the ones that kind of shake you to your core and get you to pay attention. Like it's a significantly different experience. And I always know for me, the authenticity of it is when I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do with this? It didn't come from within the realms of your own intelligence or mind. It's coming in from maybe another frequency or, dimension, who knows? Because when I met Ramsey and we were practicing and learning about mediumship, for example, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know we were after signing up for mediumship course. That was interesting for me. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll be off this course because I have no reason to be here. I don't have those experiences, like, and I didn't really want to have them either, if I was honest at the beginning. But then I I got curious and I was like, well, I'll just sit in and see what happens. And when you just give the permission and you're like, it's not like you do anything, there's no doing beforehand. You just sit there, and I guess it's all about intent, being intentional. Suddenly you have all this information flowing through a part of you, and you're kind of spitting it out and you're saying it. You don't know where it's coming from, but it is landing, and there's a space for it to land between you and the recipient. And then your consciousness, I think, is forever shifted that way, because now you've had another experience to layer on to all the others. So, you know, I highly encourage anyone who's listening to this, if you do feel like you're going a bit crazy or something, seeking out other people or a group, or, just connect with other people to help you along with that. It's a development, really. It's like how we develop. But with you, so Joel, you were testing out on the willing kind of guinea pigs from what you said. And was there a moment of kind of, did the being come back to you and say, all right, Joel, that's enough of that now. It's time to to get out there and, put your open for business sign, like, or like, how did it transition, I guess?
No, the being did not come back and say, okay, now it's time.
Okay.
No, I was tasked with the mandate to do it initially. So it was my responsibility to determine if I was going to do it and when. And the transition to doing it was just, I had some time to contemplate, how would I do that? I need to have a website. I need to, have content on the website. So I had the opportunity, because I had some time to do that and put that together. And then it's essentially been word of mouth. I'm a sole practitioner. I do everything, all the web work and everything else. And I don't have the time to learn how to do all the stuff to increase the visibility of the website and all that stuff. So I pretty much relied on people finding it by accident and then word of mouth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So I suppose it's when you're good and ready, really, is how it is. Like, it evolves. And I'm really curious though, how do people benefit? Like, what are the sort of reports that come back to you? Like, when people have these one-to-one attunements or group attunements, is there something really significant that it happens, not necessarily during it, maybe afterwards, like you said? Have you any examples or case studies?
Yeah. Well, so during it, people might feel some shifting or changing sensations in their body. They may feel some movement, or it could be perceived as pleasant or perhaps a little uncomfortable. And that's indicative of the unwinding of the contraction, or the loosening, or the beginning of the resolution of the contraction, or the completion of it. People, because the purpose really ultimately is to dissolve the contraction so that people can be more in alignment with their true nature, then they may have experiences of just for a while falling into deep states that they don't normally find themselves experiencing, or they may have done it had it in the past, and longed for it again, but it hasn't happened. So they might find themselves in a state of deep silence or deep peace. Bliss might arise. There might be lights and energy movement. So those kinds of things can happen during the attunement. The kinds of things that people get back to me on after an attunement, whether they felt those things or not, is, for example, one person I've worked with was having a hard time with his reactivity. He would react to things before thinking, and it was a pattern that he wanted to change, and he had struggled with self-improvement to do that, and that hadn't been successful for him. So it was apparent that there was a contraction that was based on a past experience that was unresolved, that was the underlying cause of this reactivity. So it was more, a reactivity to protect himself from pain or harm. So, he didn't feel much during the attunement, but about a week later, he contacted me and he said, I've just had several experiences where I would have reacted in the old way, but I didn't.
Wow.
So that's one example, but it's things that people may notice about how they react to things differently, or how perhaps their meditations are easier or quote unquote better, or just a general change in sense of well-being. So that's a couple of things that come to my mind right now in terms of things I've seen. But it's more common than not that people feel something during the attunement and then feel something has changed afterwards. Sometimes it's a kind of a vague recognition that something has changed. They just know they feel different. Or they see tangible examples of how things have changed in their experience, like the example I gave about the non-reactivity suddenly being more the case than not.
Yeah, I know that you do group work as well, and we had the pleasure of having you on my Mindful Monday group a couple of weeks ago, and you did like a live group attunement on that, and I can't remember the now. There was about 28 of us or 30 or whatever online at the time, and it was really interesting to hear people coming back on afterwards talking about how they were feeling afterwards, how they felt during it, and how some people zone out completely, and for the various reasons, I suppose experiences really vary a lot. But there was definitely a follow-up even during the days that followed where I got messages from people saying that they followed up and that they went and found some of your attunements in your library online, on your website, and on YouTube, on your YouTube channel, and they did those then independently. So I just would love you just to tease that out, just to explain it to us a little better, the difference between when we did the live group attunement, like it's a silent practice, you're giving some cues and you're guiding us in, and then with the recordings, with the attunements that are available on YouTube, there's a guidance, you're guiding in and out, but there's like a track that's playing. It's and have you composed that? Like, are they? Can you just tell us a bit more about the difference between those? Like, are the recordings like is there some sort of intention woven through? Is there, how does that work?
So they work on different principles.
Okay.
In the what I would call in-session attunement, which would be either one-on-one or group, like we did with your meditation group last week. That or the one-on-one, I'm taking a look. I'm looking in. I'm either looking into the individual or I'm looking into the collective. And the same process where I'm looking, it alerts native or divine intelligence to come in and do something with that. So that's fundamentally how that form of attunement works. The audio attunements are different. That developed when initially I was with a one-on-one attunement session, and I started receiving new numbers. And I didn't know what they were. I wrote them down, had to think about it later, like, what could this be? What could this be? Why did these come? And then, you know that expression, a little birdie told me? It was kind of like a little birdie told me. Those are frequencies. Those are audible frequencies. Oh, okay. I guess I'm supposed to do something with that. So I began exploring what I was able to do at the time. I had some very rudimentary software on my computer where I could plug in a frequency and I could hear the tone that it makes. And so I started listening to these numbers that were coming in. And I was able to sensorily, experience that they had different impact. They vibrated in different ways. Of course, they are different vibrations, but I could feel that in my body. I thought, okay, well, I imagine that what I could do here is cobble together a group of frequencies. And in the very early days of creating the audio attunements, and there's one on my YouTube channel, which was not the earliest stage, but kind of what I'm calling the retro version that some people prefer, but because it's much more electronic sounding, because that was the only technology I had at that time to produce them. So what I'm doing is I'm actually layering frequencies in these. I'm actually creating and composing these and layering frequencies in these that facilitate natural surrender primarily, which is just allowing whatever's coming up. So the instructions on a group audio attunement are to just listen with relaxed attention. We're not trying to follow the sounds. It's not like we're listening to music and we're singing along or anything like that. It's not functional that way. So just this passive attention, allowing whatever we hear that we hear, allowing whatever vibrations or frequencies that are in the audio attunement to find their way into consciousness, into the body, into the mind, and produce natural relaxation or natural surrender. And the natural surrender is important because it's in those states, like similar to when we meditate and we have a deep meditation, that the body has an opportunity to release contractions of the various natures we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. So that it has that purpose similar to the in-session attunements, but through a completely different modality. And the advantage to the group audio attunements is that I can put those up. They're not personalized, but they have frequencies embedded in them that serve the purpose. So that's one way people can access at least that form of attunement process. Because it's not personalized like an in-session attunement would be with a one-on-one or even a group, then it doesn't necessarily address specifics. It's more general purpose, but nevertheless, it's a useful tool. And they're pretty popular, although most people don't know about them. And the YouTube count looks really low, but that represents a pretty good audience of people who come back again and again. So it doesn't count them each time. So you wouldn't see the total number of views.
Okay. We talked about different types of attunements before. Is it the difference between one-on-one and a group, or is it you have different levels or different types?
So the types are either the audio attunement or the one-on-one or group, what I'm calling in-session attunement, live attunement with me. So it's either with me there or it's, the group audio attunements that are frequency-based. I do occasionally get a request to produce a personalized audio attunement. They're just very time consuming to do. But there I read the frequencies for that person and I put those into that attunement. So it's unique to them. But that isn't to the bulk of what I do. It's just something that I do occasionally.
Let me ask you a quick question. It just crossed my mind. Is it similar to sound healing?
Probably. I know that there are people who do sound healing, and I don't know the scope of how they do that. How they derive the frequencies that they use. Sometimes one of the things I've observed is some of the frequencies that I receive are not in the audible spectrum. So I had to solve that problem. How do you translate a frequency that's not audible through an audible medium? And through process primarily of asking my friends on the other side, how do I go about doing that? I was told, use a surrogate frequency, which is a harmonic of the frequency that you want to that you would otherwise reproduce, but that's not audible. So there's a way to calculate, because it's all numerical and mathematical when you deal with these frequencies. Not necessarily their results, but trying to navigate what a harmonic is, for example. So I can take a frequency that's inaudible, find an audible harmonic, and include that, which I'm told has the same effect, because one, there's the intentionality of it, and two, there's the fact that it's a harmonic to produce the result the frequency would have created had it been audible.
Okay.
Ooh. And do you find, Joel, that since it feels to me like you really kind of got fully on board with what your kind of purpose or the divinity or your benevolent being or guide wanted you to work with, for you, when you're downing tools and you're not with people and you're not doing attunements, has it brought a sense of kind of, I don't know, do you feel complete? Like, do you feel like, okay, like I'm on a mission and this is very fulfilling? Did you get any kind of feedback in terms of maybe from the benevolent beings or from whom, wherever or whatever is guiding you? Or is it just a feeling of like, yeah, this is what I'm here to do. This feels complete on some level.
This is what I'm here to do. But I'm also here to continue to develop new ways.
Okay.
So that means, I don't just do attunements. I also, like you, I'm a meditation teacher. I have a toolbox of many forms of meditation, which I can apply. I normally would consult that one-on-one to determine, what might be the most valuable practice for them to either add or do instead for now. Even though I do believe that if we can find a core practice to pretty much just commit to and do and keep doing, that's ideal. But even for people who have been doing that for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's useful for them to explore some other options, either as an add-on or as a temporary substitution, because different practices actually produce different results. Not all meditation is the same, and not all meditations move beyond the limitations of the body-mind. They function on that level. Many of them can function on a subtle level, on the soul body level, for example, but don't kind of reach all the way back into the pure conscious being. So in those kinds of consultations, I'm helping people find something that they might find kind of gets them over a hump or helps them progress. Yeah. Pardon me. in their spiritual practice. Because I see my primary role more as trying to facilitate people's awakening than, as a producer of audio attunements or, just doing these in-session attunements. But those are methods that I have available to me to be able to serve that purpose. The other purpose is my spiritual path is not over, and I don't believe it ever is for anyone. So I'm still very much focused on being alert and exploring everything within the range of my experience. And as new things arise, which they're prone to do, coming to terms to understand what they are, putting them in a context that I can understand. And if I can't understand them, they have to stay in the, not quite sure what this is yet, but with the understanding that likely at some point that will clarify and I will know what it is. And then maybe there's something there I can offer.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're nearly on. Oh, we're over the hour.
We're over.
Wow. Yeah, I just spotted it there. We're just over. I really was hoping we'd get to talk through, just maybe we'll do a quick fire just to finish it. The difference, we were talking about the difference between the terms enlightenment and awakening. And, maybe that might be a nice kind of a wrap up. How would you describe enlightenment maybe, and awakening, and what's the difference in your opinion or experience?
Well, of course, people have different experiences of awakening. But my experience initially in 1995 was that not only did my sense of identity shift, but with it, I discovered that it was radiant light. And it took me some time. And so I thought that was the way it was for everybody. But apparently it's not. And so I began to consider whether the term enlightenment was originally derived because there is a light for those people who use that term. And that maybe there is a distinction between what we just call self-realization or what we call enlightenment. I don't know. It's speculative. Because experiences differ, it's hard to say. But that light of consciousness that I discovered in that shift is very significant because, at least in my experience, it's that light that reveals what we experience or what we perceive. It's like a flashlight in a dark room. When the light of consciousness shines through the room, then one can see what's there. And so that then led into some other experiences with the portal at the base of who we are, what I call the divine heart of being, which is a very brightly lit portal. But that's the portal between the awakened sense of self, the true nature sense of self, the pure conscious being sense of self, and the divine realm. So that was something I don't hear many people talk about that, but there are some things that people probably don't want to talk about publicly.
True.
So it's hard to know what some of their more subtle or more deeply profound experiences are, because they're not talking about it, I presume.
Yeah, I was reading a book the other day, and it was saying that this was within a Buddhist tradition, but the teacher was saying to the student, look, there's no point in trying to explain your kind of expanded spiritual experience to another person, because it can kind of dilute your personal experience, and those experiences can often be seen as a catalyst for part of your awakening or part of your journey, absolutely specific to that person. And so diluting it is not really what it's about. Like, so it's like trying to understand something using, it's like trying to measure, I suppose, a grapefruit using a straight ruler. You know what I mean? You're not going to do a great job of that. Like, so yeah, that's why I think sometimes we can get caught in terminology and kind of earlier ideas about what something is or isn't, so yeah, I think I like when you use the word light with enlightenment. It's kind of with light, that really resonates with me. And then for me, the awakening is that kind of realization. It's like something within you wakes up and it's like, hold on, have I been asleep half my life? Like, you know what I mean? So that's how I kind of interpret it. What about you, Ramsey? Do you want to wrap it up with your interpretation or?
Same thing. You feel that you were trapped for half of your life, and now your eyes are open. And one thing I want to say, I did take the one-on-one with Joel. It was a shifting experience. It was amazing. It took a week or a couple of days after for it to fully integrate within me, because the energy was spinning so strong that at a certain point I wasn't able to focus on it itself. And then as time progressed, it started to slow down and kind of balance within me. It's an amazing experience. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sure. And I do encourage you for the listeners to check out his website, fulldancircle.org. The website again is fulldancircle.org, and it's in the description of the YouTube video. And with that, Joel, I really thank you very much. Thank you for being with us two episodes. It's really it was enlightening. We were able to see a different side of experiences that we might have heard of or actually experienced. And for that, we say thank you. And I wish all our listeners a wonderful rest of the weekend. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Ramsey. Great to see you guys. And thanks for coming back.
Thank you.